So one thing that's probably quite obvious to anyone, right, is the sensitivities when you're working international. Famously, last century, there was a book called Kiss, Bow, Shake Hands that was about the intricacies of international business, right? Like, are you kissing your business partners, shaking hands, bowing, right? Very, very different languages. And it's certainly, I mean, I shared an anecdote of how things can go wrong, but internally, when you're working internationally, you have to be aware of some of these cultural sensitivities with your coworkers. So, for example, on a team I had that was working globally, this client had a dealer network, so they didn't go directly to their customers. There were dealers in between, and we needed to do a little bit of work um, communicating what the company wanted the dealers to know for how they should be presenting the brand and selling products, right? So kind of a mix of internal comms with PR when you have a dealer network, right? So it's its own thing. And so we came up with this idea to have a dealer newsletter, so we could have once a month or every other month a newsletter that went to them with company news and things they should be paying attention to, rather than just hitting them with emails all the time and updates. It was we'll package a nice newsletter so it's something entertaining for them to read. So our person working in Singapore started this newsletter, and he reached out to dealers and got their buy-in and wanted them to be a part of it, let them know it was coming and that it was important. We did 3 or 4 of the newsletters, and then back at headquarters, client basically said, yeah, this doesn't really mean anything to me. You know, this isn't what my main goals are. I appreciate the strategy, but I don't know, you know, maybe our resources should be elsewhere. So I spoke to this gentleman in Singapore and said, you know what, I think from corporate, they don't really want to do this anymore. We should probably stop doing it. And he didn't want to let it go. And he basically was like, no, we just started this. I talked to all these people. Like, I need to at least give this a year or two. And me being an American, I was just kind of like, well, if it's not what someone wants, like, let's kill it, right? Let's get rid of it. And so someone else stepped in and said, hey, like, if he does that, he's gonna lose face. Like, it's Asia. He kind of put his word behind it and said, I'm doing this project and I want you all to be partners, and he would lose face, right? Or be embarrassed to just cut this project so soon after it started. And so for that, we said that we had to say, okay, well, we're just gonna let it go, because not everything is always about the immediate results. Sometimes, a lot of times, right, business is relationships, and he needed to uphold relationships to be an effective communicator in that region. So that's just one example of how it's come up for me. And I'd love to hear if you guys have any examples of working either with internal coworkers or with clients, where you've had to be aware of certain cultural sensitivities.
I don't know if I have an example, but it is always in the back of my head because I know that we Brazilians are very informal and we are very touchy too. Like we hug, we kiss. So sometimes, and of course, I moved to Germany first, so I had a good place to stop and see. Oops. First people was hugging like Brazilian way. People are like, oh, what's going on? Like strangers. I mean, people I was being introduced to. So this is something it's always in the back of my head, especially in the work environment, right? Like you never
Mhm.
know. Sometimes it's like, should I hug? Should I just, shake hands? And yeah, it's something we are I've developed a system. Like I see what others are doing because especially like we are American company but we have international clients, so my head is kind of, I'm always a little bit confused, so I just check the space, the environment. Okay, people are shaking hands. Oh, it's fine to hug.
Mhm.
And yeah, this is definitely something interesting because you don't want to be so impersonal because of course you want to
Mhm.
build a good relationship, right? But you
Mhm.
also don't want to go beyond the line.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
you got to find a
Yeah,
balance.
that's a great point. In person is completely different than content or phone calls or video meetings. In person actually is it's the stakes are a bit higher, right?
Yeah.
I actually remember when you said that, it's funny. My first trip to London for business, and there was a woman who I had known for a year doing video chats with and phone calls, and felt, so we felt like we knew each other. And the first time we go to meet each other, she went in for the kiss on the cheek, and I went for the immediate handshake. And basically my hand just went like boom, like right into her stomach, almost like a gut
Oh,
punch,
awesome.
right? Because it just happened so fast. And we both had a good laugh about it. But yeah, that in-person communication is huge. and and actually it's quite beneficial to meet people in person, isn't it? Right, because you get a much better sense of how they communicate, and you can build a relationship a lot better. What do you think, Ricardo?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Meeting someone in person takes the relationship to a different level, right? Once after meeting someone, you get on the phone, it's a different interaction. You know that person, you've met that person, you've shared maybe a meal, right, with that person. So yeah, it's very beneficial. I was thinking of that we have the COVID, we have pandemic in the last 3 years that have changed a bit of how the interactions happen in person, right? The handshake, and I don't know if the Brazilians are continuing to kiss as much as they used to, right, Mariana?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's a little more fist bumping. So it's interesting to think about that.
Mm. So have you dealt with any cultural sensitivities in the past? I mean, particularly, you're a very international person. You've been to more states than I have, by the way. I'm an American, and you've been to like triple the number of states I have. So you're a world traveler. Have you dealt with any sensitivities?
Yes. So working with multiple language teams in different organizations that I've worked in the past, I just had the feeling and the perception that everyone is sensitive. Every culture is sensitive, in particular about their language and the way that things are communicated in that language. So I think between Brazil and Portugal, I think people in Brazil and vice versa don't want to be spoken to or in the form of content uh, when the content is actually coming from the other country. So I think it's just from my experience of working with different translators and communications folks, we all are a bit particular about our language, especially our native language, and it's sometimes we have flaws, sometimes we don't. We make mistakes.
Yeah. One thing I've learned working internationally, and I've had the chance to Latin America, Europe, like Canada, which, believe it or not, Canada is a bit of a different environment than North America. I have noticed that, like, fundamentally though, people respect each other and treat each other nicely, and there are peculiarities. I mean, we go to international trade shows a lot, right? And then you have everyone from around the world in one place, and everyone gets along great in my experience, right? The different groups, definitely you can tell who's who, right? Um, just like from my experience, like the Latin American folks, they want to have fun when they're at the trade show. That's who I'm trying to find at night after dinner, because they're singing and dancing and everyone's like getting into it. um, but I do find fundamentally, like worldwide, there is respect and manners, and people want to be nice to each other and communicate with each other.
Understand, because language is very much related to your culture, who you are, and what you want, especially in the international environment. And Ricardo mentioned Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese from Brazil. For example, it's rare, or basically we can't find Portuguese from Portugal. it's maybe hard to understand, but Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese from Brazil are the same but different languages. They are you can tell by the way it's written that it came from a different country. So it's very rare to find in Brazil or Brazilian outlets texts written in like by someone who is versed in Portuguese from Portugal, because there is probably this protective thing, and it's very attached to your culture. So it's, yeah, I think it's understandable that translator adapters are very, very protective of our reviewers. In our case, like local people that we send to, it's like, hey, this is not the same word for me as like having another language as not my primary language. I was like, well, but these words are like the same. Yeah, but there's this nuance, and we would like to use this second word instead of the one that you put here. So that's why it's so important to have this local source to tell you, yeah, that's the way you should go.
Yeah. Well, and you have to maintain those relationships with those local experts, right? So there's a
Yeah.
little bit of you needing to show some empathy and understanding when you're working on a piece of content with them, right? So
Yeah.
you're very much in listening mode at that point, and adapting, right? And you've told me in the past actually that I guess people don't call it translating as much anymore, right? You said it's more adapting or adaptation, or
Yeah, definitely. In newsrooms where you work like with international desks, at least the ones I've worked for, we call it adapting. Because many times it's not a pure translation. There is a lot that if you really translate the way it is, it feels it sounds robotic. So you kind of put the we say in Portugal it's seasoning, like the salt. So it feels, like more natural, and it's so funny because that goes for audio too. I remember some time ago when I was working as a journalist, and we were adapting the video, and we had to dub the video, right? Like to record in Portuguese. And it was a video about video games. And of course, there are many words in English. And I was already living some time out of Brazil. And I remember recording that video and listening to that again, which I hate doing, by the way, because I hate hearing my voice. But I went back. I was like, "There's something wrong here. I checked the script, and there's something wrong." And after listening for the third time, I was like, "I'm speaking the English words with the English accent." We have to say, instead of video game, you have to say video game. Instead of smartphone, you have to say smartphone. Like a little bit of a difference, so the audience can connect with you. Otherwise we feel like, a foreigner somewhere, somebody who doesn't know where you are, who's trying to deliver that content, and that's not ideal. That might not land well.